Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Gulfport FR152. This is a reinforcement. This is a reinforcement box for either a deadbolt strike or a 2 3/4 T strike. And this is an item that's used in a hollow metal shop or someone who's doing some retrofitting in the field, but this is meant to be welded in place. So a hollow metal shop is who I think is going to be using this mostly. And what I mean by that is if you're retrofitting into an existing frame in the field, such as how a locksmith would approach it, you're going to be looking for drilled and tapped holes here where you can create the preparation, the rectangular preparation with or without the lip in the jamb, get this piece put in there, and then you're looking to drill and countersink a couple of holes in the frame itself and attaching the material like you would in aluminum storefront work. So this is meant for a hollow metal application because that's what Gulfport manufactures. Gulfport, and I'll show you their catalogs, but they have two different divisions, so to speak. They sell a lot of hardware. I don't buy any of it, so I don't have any experience. Not that I wouldn't buy it, but it just doesn't cross my path, so to speak. And they have their parts, and their parts are what everything could be possibly requested by a hollow metal shop for the most part. When you're doing hollow metal work, if you're a distributor or someone who is involved in installing hollow metal and you need to make some modifications, or you're a manufacturer, you need piece parts. You need pieces of steel to weld in for door closers, for reinforcements. You need floor anchors. You need U-channel glazing, U-channel that's used for glazing, or maybe L-shaped channel used for spreader bars. And you need a variety of reinforcements, whether it be for strikes or hinges. You need the ability to prep the hollow metal material itself to suit the requirements. And what I mean by that is, well, you've got a door and a frame and your customer wants a deadbolt in addition to the lock set. Well, this is a really handy piece. And how you go about installing this, well, let's talk about that now. How would you go about installing this? If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. So, we've done deadbolt preps countless times, whether, in the vertical height of where you will install it, 48-inch from the finished floor up, or 48-inch, I should say, from the bottom of the jamb to the center line is pretty typical. If you've got, like when we were Kiwani distributors in the 90s, we would put that at 7 11/16 above the lock prep. Why? Because that's the math that worked out to be that 48-inch based on the lock location. There's no hard and fast rule of where you would install it, except, of course, you're installing an interconnected lock that requires a specific center to center, or you might be installing it to match other existing installations. You might have a bank of doors, and they all have interconnected locks, like you might see in, where you'll see a series of interconnected locks would be condo work. So you're going to want to make sure if you're doing a new installation, you might match everything else. I've seen a deadbolt installed, 18 inches up above the lock, and that's great. I actually like spreading it out myself, moving it out further. But if you've got a bunch of them that are 5.5 inch on center, it's odd. So once you've decided on what your vertical center line is going to be, all you're going to do is take your strike, which is 2 3/4 by 1 1/8. Maybe it's 1 inch. You have to decide or measure what that is. And you're going to prep the jamb for that. Now, you can do that in a variety of ways. Some people will take a die grinder and cut it and then file the corners. Some people will take an 1/8 of an inch and then a 1/4 inch high-speed steel drill bit and drill in the 4 corners and then jigsaw cut that straight. If you're doing aluminum work, you could use a router. If you have a demand where you do deadbolt strikes all the time, you're going to buy a die set. You're going to have this in a press, and you'll have a die set, and you'll be able to punch that hole. When the factory does it, based on how I've seen it, they're going to have literally a giant punch press for doing these. I don't know how many tons, but you can just, as quickly as you can slide the jamb into place and hit the stop, and then, your two hands come up and you operate the machinery, you will punch that hole. I've also seen it done in a CNC turret where the steel is still in the flat. It goes into the machine and the machine just punches holes. Every hole necessary is what it's punching, and then it goes to the press brake where it then gets bent. So the hole's already prepped. If you're doing it in the field, you're going to work with what tools you have probably. That could be a jigsaw or a die grinder. Die grinders are okay, but they're loud and messy. They create a lot of particulate, a lot of minuscule pieces of metal, heat, lots of noise. A jigsaw is also noisy as well, but you have to prep it somehow. If you do a lot of them, investigate a press. The die set won't be cheap, but if you do them routinely, you'll be able to do deadbolt strike preparations and jams in minutes, and it's going to look beautiful every single time. Meaning it's the perfect, preparation of what that die set is. So once you've got the hole prepped, however you're going to go about doing it, what we would end up doing is basically getting this in the inside of the frame and then literally attaching the strike to it, or attach the strike to it. You've got the jam turned throat side towards you. Attach your hardware to it so that it will allow you to place this, and then you just simply tack weld it. Be generous with the welding. Lay down a nice bead. It's a deadbolt strike, so this plate needs to be very secure to the jam. And once you've got that there, now we wouldn't use the actual hardware from the client. We would have every welder is going to have a deadbolt strike and a couple of screws at their bench. So you're going to use one piece, and that allows you to make sure this is completely set correctly. Now it's open here because this is the face that's going to make contact with the inside face, generally a 2-inch face, the face of the frame itself. Now this is more than just a reinforcement. This is also a dust box. A dust box is the term that we use to basically close off the outside of the frame, or what could be the living space, whatever it might be, and the throat of the frame, meaning the wall construction of what's behind there, the particulate of drywall or masonry. You don't want that creeping in through that hole, and you'll very often see plastic dust boxes, very commonly, even metal dust boxes, although they're less common nowadays because they're more expensive. But this is mounting tabs to get the deadbolt strike installed and a dust box. These are nice because it's a 2-in-1, and if you're doing a deadbolt strike prep, it could be an exterior door, which means there could be masonry involved, a welded frame, which means without the dust box, as your mason is backfilling, troweling grout into the opening as they're laying the courses, you've got a frame in place and it's been shot down to the floor with a pneumatic, powder actuated tool. As you bring in the courses of block and brick, whatever it is, and you're backfilling that grout in there, the last thing you want is to fill that hole with grout. Your deadbolt will never go in. I've seen that countless times. It's as hard as it when those frames don't have a dust box and you've gone to the job site and you've seen that they've filled that grout and completely brought it to the surface here, and you wrap on it, you realize that's as hard as the hardest element in the universe. It just seems like it's impossible. It's awful when that is done. I feel very bad for the hardware person or the hardware installer because the mason is not thinking about it. That's going to blow back on not the mason, because he was just installing what he was given. He doesn't feel obligated, or he generally doesn't feel obligated to think that my grout is going to spill through this opening. It's going to blow back on the supplier. So you better make sure that you have a dust box when it's a masonry application. Now, a dust box, a cheap way to do it as well, a handy way, and absolutely do it, and it works, is get yourself some 1.5-inch thick insulation and use duct tape and tape it in there just to keep that mortar from getting inside of that area where your bolt's going to have to project into, so you block that off. So this FR152 does both of those jobs. Weighs maybe 0.13 pound. I think that's what it weighs. Let's switch to the screen view and let's take a look at all the supporting information. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. Here is the item that we are looking at. There's an image of the item, and speaking of image, let's take a look at the images that we have of this item. Just different perspectives. That's going to be an 832 thread that's there. That hardware is going to come with your Deadbolt or your T-Strike. So I've said Deadbolt and T-Strike. The bottom line is both the Deadbolt strike. Almost all Deadbolt strikes are 2 3/4. You will see some that aren't. Generally, very, very, very 10 more varies. Low end, low cost. Builders, Home Depot clearance blue light special Deadbolts will have a 2 1/4 tall Deadbolt strike, but commercial material is 2 3/4. Now, this can also be used for our ever famous T-Strike. And T-Strikes, of course, you're going to see in lots of lock sets. Grade 2 cylindrical. Baldwin is a great name for residential hardware where you can do full lip strikes, or a T-Strike, or even a 4 7/8 strike. A full lip strike is what we would call a D-Strike because it has a full lip on it. Okay. And then the 4 7/8 strike it looks just like this, except it's not 2 3/4 tall. It's 4 7/8 and can have one hole in it. It can have two. You can have them in an unusual location as well. So if you have a latch or a lock set, you could have a T-Strike. And this same reinforcement will work. A building that I lived in the early 90s was built in about 1970 or 71. It was originally built with all of the interior partition walls of the 90 condos were 2.5-inch studs, 1/2-inch rock, 3.5-inch throat, knockdown steel frames that went in, and they were odd door sizes, like 2.6 by 7.4. It was an unusual door height. Well, 1 3/8. Well, all of them, all these hollow metal frames, they all were prepped for T-Strikes. Extremely common. This was going to be the typical strike on a lock that you'd get decades ago. So I guess just a long way around saying T-Strikes as well. Different perspectives. Backside. This is going to be white coat galvanized steel is what that is. Corrosion resistance. After you're done welding this in, you want to hit the weld with primer, showing the tapped hole there. The factory also, below this video, is also going to be a link to the product catalog, and this will allow you to see other piece parts from Gulfport. Okay. Here's another handy flush bolt strike as well, a reinforcement dust box situation. This would be used for a flush bolt strike. Now this is closed on both sides. That's because a flush bolt strike is smaller in width, and you're not going to back that up to the face of the frame like you would with this one. Mullion brackets, very unusual for anyone in the field to ever need that material. But this is stuff that you're going to see primarily in a hollow metal shop, a fabrication shop. Now, I want to navigate you to additional supporting information. So on the item, at this time of me making this video, this item doesn't exist in the site, but you'll land on this page and it will look like this, except it'll be the FR152. Below this video is a link here to the manufacturer's page, and from here you can pull up not only all of the Gulfport products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to their hardware catalog, which I had mentioned earlier. I don't do much. There's not much of a need for me to get into this. and there's no reason that I don't, except, like I said, it doesn't cross my path. I'm assuming this is all imported from Asia, and it's just nothing that I end up bumping into in terms of needing yet another supplier for Asian imported hardware. And nothing against Gulfport. I just, I don't bump into it that often. Clearly other people do, because they don't have a catalog and not sell any of it. But as I look at this material, it's a very common brand that they're bringing in. Nonetheless, keep you aware of this material. Now, when it comes to the parts catalog, it is here. This is likely an older version of this document, but hollow metal piece parts don't change that often, if ever. And as you scroll through, you're going to find a variety of neat things. If you do fabrication work, you will absolutely want to have this catalog as a resource available to you. And I can go on at length on talking about each and every one of these parts because of my experience. Just on this one page alone, you have an unusual base anchor. You have a double egress stud anchor. You have a wood stud, a double egress metal stud anchor. You have a double egress T anchor. You have a welded in T anchor. Back in the early, I would say the 60s and 70s, if you needed a 3-hour installation, it was mandatory that those T anchors were welded in. I love welded in T anchors. And you know why? It's impossible for the driver to leave the box on the dock when the truck leaves to go deliver all the frames, to show up a 90-minute one-way drive and the anchors aren't there. All of the frames you're dropping off are now useless without that small box of anchors. You can't forget the anchors with these. These are floor anchors, or what these are, adjustable floor anchors. If you had a garage like we did in 97, I think, I did 910 South Michigan, which used to be the Standard Oil building, and we did an obscene amount of doors in that building, hundreds, and the pour of the concrete in what was becoming the parking garage, because that Standard Oil building was becoming condos, very out of place. So there were some instances where the contractor, he was a really nice guy who was running the job for the contractor. He understood that mistakes happen, and he was extremely willing and able to make problems easier rather than harder on all parties interested. The point being is, he said, hey, those adjustable floor anchors, I'm going to need some of those. Wire anchors in different profiles. This is a welded in steel stud anchor. I'd call it a Z anchor. I like the Z anchor a lot, in the sense that we used to make custom Z anchors. And what I mean by that is this. You have a customer who says, listen, when are my welded frames going to be ready? I says, well, like I told you, it's going to take 2 weeks. He says, I can't wait. I can't wait for that. He says, what can I do? I says, well, can you take knockdowns? Nope, absolutely cannot. And I'm only asking because it's an option. It's not a good option, but it's an option. Absolutely not. I says, well, here's what I can do. I can make you can continue on with your framing, 3070. Let's say you rough in with your metal studs to 40 1/4 by 86 1/4. I can then make a Z anchor that when I weld it in, it will come flush with the backside. So my dimension here to here is like 1 7/8. So he could then leave that opening, slide the frames in, even though he can't shoot them to the floor. He can then, because his stud is already here, right? Or his studs. Probably one stud. He probably held back the second stud. Then he can get in here. Well, actually, I drew that wrong. Metal stud, so it's going to look like this. And then he can use his tech screws and screw into those flanges because it's flush here. A normal Z anchor, a welded in Z anchor, is only going to come out to here, where that stud's got to go inside the throat of the frame. I don't know if that's required for a fire-rated opening, but I do know that you have to have a minimum of 1/2 inch of drywall penetration behind the frame in order for it to be compliant. So I don't know that this violated any of that. And we have done that in a number of instances. And we were able to reuse piece parts from the shop to make these, because the dimension I'm needing, I'd have to think about what we were doing. To make those. Yeah, sure. So what you would do is you would take this section right here. That's going to end up being this. Actually this. And basically, this dimension is your 2 inch, because that's the 2 inch, pardon me, 1 and 15/16, because this is the rabbet of the door. So that was pretty perfect with the installation. If we had a header or jams or mullions that were scrap, they were cutoffs, we could easily put those into the chop saw and make these all day long. It's not easy, but you know, you're not giving it away, I hope. Existing wall anchor here, and just on and on. I could, you know, talk about all of these piece parts. It's nice to have the material available to you. And we try to keep, we certainly from Gulfport keep the real common material in stock. Let's wrap up this video on camera. If you've made it this far into this video, you must be determined to see it through to the end, and we appreciate your hanging in there with us and watching this entire video. It means a lot. It takes a lot of work to create these videos, in the sense that, you know, it's time taken away from doing other things. However, the advantage for me personally of creating these videos is the fact that it does allow myself to either learn about something new, to reacquaint myself with something, or to reinforce what I believe that I already know. Any comments that you might leave down below would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Now, in conclusion, Gulfport's probably going to fit in to your scheme, your short-term goals, in the sense that the box of anchors were left on the dock, and I need them tomorrow. Tomorrow is Saturday, and I've got to have 100 T-anchors because the mason is showing up, and if he's not here, I won't be able to get him back to the job for 6 weeks. That's generally what happens when you've got a manufacturer of parts. There's a gal over at Gulfport that has been extremely willing and able to help me in a side project that I'm working on, which happens to be in the Steel Door Institute's website. They have a nomenclature PDF. Could be 20 pages long. I'm making a video on every entry in the glossary from the Steel Door Institute, and Gulfport has been extremely generous to send me a sample of a piece. Adjustable floor anchor is in that glossary, in that Steel Door SDI. It might be SDI.org. Let me confirm that. No, it's not. Steel Door Institute is steeldoor.org. And when you get to steeldoor.org, you will be able to find... Well, there's currently a drop-down called Standards, and then go to Technical Data Series, and you will find the governing documents in the industry. That are always going to be mentioned in construction documents. And I'm looking for the document that I'm referring to, glossary. It's SDI. It's their publication 134, and then it's currently -20. So the year of 2020 is the most current year. So that's what I'm referring to. But when you look through the SDI site and all of these other publications, for instance, recommended selection and usage guide for standard steel doors. I've been selling hollow metal doors for 30 years, my family for many more decades than that. That's where I look to that's where everyone in the industry looks to say, what door do you need for your application? What should be the classification, meaning the gauge, other details to the door. So extremely beneficial for you to be able to go through all of that. If you involve yourself in hollow metal at any level, that is going to be information that will greatly improve your ability to efficiently understand what's being discussed and execute the work. Anyway, Gulfport's a good company, and definitely consider them for piece parts and anything else that they do, in fact. And they're probably 2.5 hours from me up the coast of Florida, and I've been working with them for 25 years. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please subscribe and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.